Elina, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we are live now. So welcome, guys, to the Gothenburg Tech Week, How to Build a Great Eco Tech System. My name is Elina Akelind, and I am one of the organizers behind Gothenburg Tech Week, which we are now on day 2 of. Gothenburg Tech Week is a proud part of the Nordic tech ecosystem. With the possibilities of digitalization, we are working closer than ever together now. And this is one part of it where we can all agree upon that a thriving ecosystem is a vital part in building, growing, and maintaining startups and scale-ups in a region. But what does it really take? Apart from money, what are the key components of a really good tech ecosystem, and what challenges do we face trying to build it? We have invited a panel of 4 experts from different regions in Northern Europe, and will for the coming 45 minutes discuss this. There will be possibilities to ask questions, so please put them in the comments and I'll ask them accordingly. Well, let's get started, and I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Jeanette.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeanette Carlson, and I'm the founder and CEO of Tech Nordic Advocates. Lovely to be here. I look forward to talking to you and answering, hopefully, some questions.
Thank you, Jeanette. And Björn, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Byron. I was the former head of community for an Estonian founded fintech startup. And then I was the head of Startup Extreme here in Norway. And now I'm doing the market distribution for Norwegian gaming startups. So spent most of my time in the Nordics in startups, building communities and ecosystems.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Björn. And Lars.
Well, good morning to you. I'm Lars Byrne. I work with the Municipal Economic Development Agency, Business Region Gothenburg. I'm focusing with my team on the automotive and transport sectors, but previously I worked with innovation on a general perspective across different sectors. So that's me.
Thank you so much. And Kai, please introduce yourself.
Hi, hello to everybody. I'm Kai Isans. I'm from Estonia. I've been part of the Estonian ecosystem or startup ecosystem for about 7 years, really seeing many different aspects of it. I've been working with the public sector, building a government innovation lab, organizing hackathons, tech conferences, to kind of being part of the early stage kind of support organizations. And now building a startup myself with a hackathon organizing platform. So kind of looking at each of the sides of the community.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. And I think that is a great trait to have, both working for the building the ecosystem, but also being a part of it. But I want to start with that. I mean, we are talking about the tech ecosystem, but what does it mean? What is an ecosystem to you? I know, Jeanette, you have been having a really good definition of this. Please share it, how you see upon it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we all know, I mean, there's not any one definition that's better than another. I think it's more to do with what are the building blocks of a good ecosystem. Yeah, and I think, as we talked about before, an absolutely essential component, obviously, is people, and partners, but also a desire to collaborate, and it's a mindset thing, actually. It's about a mindset that actively goes searching for opportunities to make 2 and 2 equal 5. So 2 parties in the ecosystem meet, have a chat and identify opportunities to work together and go away and think, we're really going to make this happen. That's so important. Just having a lot of people is good, but without the mindset of the openness and the desire to collaborate and give as well as get, it will never happen. So that's an absolutely fundamental requirement. And then, as many of you know, and we will discuss in more detail, other components are, access to talent and skills, access to capital, access to experienced people with experience of launching, growing, scaling digital and technology startups and scale-up. So those are kind of the fundamental building blocks. But I think it's very important to emphasize the point that, with all of those building blocks, those are necessary conditions, if you like, enablers. But without that real desire to collaborate and partner, it will never happen. So that's fundamental.
Thank you. And Kai, coming from your perspective, you have a really interesting ecosystem in the Baltics. What do you think is the most important parts? What has been the most important parts to build the ecosystem that you're in?
Yeah, well, listening, Jeanette, I think exactly, like people are in the middle, right? And when we think about startup community, I think, the first thing we think about startups and entrepreneurs, and they are the central figure there. But then from my perspective, it's like all the kind of building blocks around them, helping them out, right? So for myself, it's definitely has been, kind of like this community of organizations building up the new kind of early stage world there. So, hackathons, events, programs, accelerators, you said capital, but then, this knowledge base as well for actually new entrepreneurs to come on the scene. And then what I've seen in Estonia is also the public sector support, right? So at one point when we realized that, this has so much potential and power, and then all these institutions that were created were there to kind of push along, right? Like, where's the capital coming from? What's the regulation that we need? We've launched the startup visa. So it's kind of just like all the building blocks around the entrepreneurs as well, kind of catering to their needs, right? And that right now we're seeing already, new things that the entrepreneurs need. So I already see the community kind of responding, and new things are being created. So yeah, from my side, I would definitely add those two, so that you would have to have those organizations helping them out, and you would have to have the public sector also working towards the same goals.
That is super interesting. And also, Björn, from your perspective, we have been talking about the importance of entrepreneurs leading the way. How do you see, how important is it for the entrepreneurs that have already done the journey to get back and share their experience?
Yeah, I think, Kai can probably attest to this, but I think that the Estonian ecosystem is largely fueled by this concept. And I think there is something in general to proximity to greatness is kind of how I think of it. Regardless of what you're trying to do, if you're trying to become a professional athlete, it helps you more if a relative or somebody that has been a professional athlete, because they know exactly what it takes to get to that level. And similarly with the startups, the more entrepreneurs or even C-suite level employees that have exited a company, an early stage company, that then come back and share those experiences and mentor the next generation, the better off the ecosystem is and the faster it ends up growing.
Thank you. And Lars, you're from the municipality or from the public sector coming into this, as Kai said, and also beforehand, and it's an important part to have that backing up. So would you, and also being a local here in Gothenburg, you are a part of this tech ecosystem here. How do you look at this from building an ecosystem? What is your take on how does Business Region Gothenburg helps with that?
Well, I mean, we want to provide the best sort of possibilities for industry in general, but I can see that, I mean, the startup industry and the tech ventures that are emerging they are transforming things much faster. So, I mean, we have really good things in Gothenburg and West Sweden. We have the highest R&D spendings in Sweden of some 41 billion Swedish crowns. And it actually places us on the third highest ranking region per capita in Europe among the 250 regions. So it's a lot of industrial capital being invested here and a lot of talent working, especially in the automotive, life science and chemistry sectors. But from my perspective is that I can see that both the industry is opening up much more to nurture sort of the inputs that are coming from the tech industry and the startups, but also, as I mentioned, I think the startups are also accelerating the transformation of the industry. So if you, by example, look at the automotive industry, you can see a lot of tech influences going in there. And I mean, a vehicle of today is not a vehicle, some parts of steel on four wheels. It's actually a number of computers and sensors on four wheels, and the whole sort of user experience with you as a driver or you as a transport buyer or something like that. So that's I think that's mostly our perspective on it. You're muted, Elena.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Here in Gothenburg, we have quite strong verticals in the automotive industry or deep tech and some life science. Is that a success factor to build a stronger system, to have these verticals, or should you have a broader perspective? Janet, I mean, what's your take on that? It comes from London.
Well, I think, you know, and Gothenburg is a very good example. Often these clusters arise because of dominant industries, right? So in Gothenburg, automotive is a very dominant industry. Mm-hmm. So that often gives rise to new innovation or disruption even. And those are often the building blocks of new clusters, new verticals, if you like. And if you take London as an example, fintech is the sector, is the vertical that springs to mind. So, you know, Europe's largest still after Brexit, financial services, banking financial services sector is based in London. And so it is not too much of a surprise that that fintech is a huge cluster in tech startup ecosystem innovation. You know, obviously, you know, fueled by and built around that huge financial services industry, and so on. And so you have, you know, countries, and Sweden again is one in terms of, you know, pharma and life sciences. You get a lot of health tech, med tech built around that, and so on. So that's so there's obviously often natural reasons why those clusters arise. Should you go and build them, or should we be broad? I don't know that you should try and do anything or try and create anything like that artificially. I think clusters, innovation, disruption, as I've just said in terms of automotive and fintech, often arise in response to challenges or you know, big problems, opportunities. So that's why I rise. I think what should happen, and I think you make a very good point about that, Kai, is about the convolution of the public sector and the private sector and universities, R&D and so on, playing together to nurture that innovation. And we are very good at that in the Olympics, right? We are very good at the whole triple helix thing, and I think we have demonstrated that can be the bedrock of innovation is where we go. But I don't think you should try and go and create a certain cluster. I think you should nurture and support and provide the infrastructure for the kind of clusters that are naturally, you know, arising.
So it's starting with the entrepreneurs basically and the startups, and then go from there.
But from a public sector perspective, you know, building and supporting the infrastructure that allows that to happen and allows that to grow.
I don't have much new to add, but I'm just really agreeing on this. And as we were preparing for this panel, we were laughing as well, right? That we are all agreeing a lot with each other. But definitely, I would say the same thing, that it has happened in Estonia, that we do have a lot of crypto startups gathering there. We have good regulation, but again, it's not something that has been pushed, right? It kind of comes from the entrepreneurs. It comes from the actual conversation between the public sector and the kind of entrepreneurial community. So if there's a need, then cater for it, but you cannot said artificially create it. But I think it's something that is really kind of not maybe emphasized a lot, how much actually regulation and this kind of legal framework can help to create that entrepreneurial community, or create this very themes or topics that actually make your country, community, nation to stand out in the world, right? So I think that's an important thing to emphasize, that this is kind of happening behind the scenes, right? Or kind of on the kitchen side, that these conversations are happening, and that these systematic changes are pushed through.
And to add on to that, I mean, all of these things are happening from the entrepreneurs and from the startups coming on, and then having these support systems going around it. But I mean, one major thing to be able to have these startups existing at all is capital, of course, and going money into these startups to be able to build them. Björn, how, from a tech ecosystem, or from an ecosystem perspective, how could you nurture or getting money into the system? What's your?
I think it largely depends on how big your local ecosystem actually is.
Sort of half a million, like Gothenburg region with the Sweden.
But I think something that we didn't talk about early on with these, what enables or what constitutes an ecosystem, is also the access to international communities. So it's not just enough to have your local ecosystem providing capital, competence, experience, and collaboration, but access to the international community, especially in the Nordics, is, unless you're maybe in Stockholm, is largely required. So for startups in Tallinn, for startups in Oslo, in order for us to grow significantly, we need access to international capital, and the local support, in whether it comes from, for us, it's Innovation Norway that provides a lot of that very early stage funding, and angel investors in these sorts of institutions, and some up and coming good VC funds here. But still, you need the international investment, and that's a part of the ecosystem or community that I think we haven't yet, which would be interesting to touch on, about how they're attracting this, particularly from, I don't know what's happening in Gothenburg, for example, but with Estonia, I think Kai can probably talk about that, and then also in London as well.
Kai, what has been your success? You have been getting a lot of unicorns out of your region, and there's have been happening a lot, and of course a lot of international capital has been going in there. How did that happen? How did that go?
I think that's the $1 million question, right? And I think, we have to zoom out and kind of look at the whole timeline. It didn't happen overnight, right? And I guess that's that's the kind of development of the ecosystem that we're seeing. That after Skype, of course, not most of them, but a lot of the employees of Skype are now the founders of the startups, right? And they have the their networks that are already international. I think Estonia is on the map anyway in the world, right? So the kind of foreign capital is coming in, and there's a lot of kind of work done from different institutions, right, to kind of put them on the map. So I think, yeah, it's kind of just the development of it, and just seeing, you know, the next generation of entrepreneurs becoming angels and becoming investors, bringing in their network that they had when they built their companies, and really just seeing them working together. So if we take, you know, the Pipedrive exit, which was recent, then quite quickly, you know, they are kind of gathering together and making starting to make angel investments, right? So that means it's kind of like the next era of capital going around, and that is of course on the local scene, but they are bringing in their international contacts to bring in the foreign money as well. So I think it's just, you know, that network kind of expanding and expanding every time there's a success story.
Mm-hmm. Lars, from a public perspective, I mean, I know you or Business Region Gothenburg is working with larger investors or larger investments for the bigger corporations. But what do you think? How can you be a part of the capital attraction for the startup community?
I think as to add on to the discussion, I think you're very concise and clear on the building of clusters and everything, and focusing on the strong clusters that we do have. But also you can see a lot of sort of convergence and spillover happening in between clusters. So I mean, the tech industry is actually infusing a lot of these traditional industries like life science and automotive. So you can see a lot of things that have happened and been successful here in terms of machine learning and AI are now being implemented with new innovations and new ventures into the automotive sector and the life science industry. But in terms of capital, it's a disadvantage. I have to be honest, not being a financial city, financial center, that's a disadvantage, because the venture capitalists are turning to big investors like insurance companies and pension funds and so on. And they're not present here as well as they are in Oslo, in Stockholm, in Copenhagen, and so on. So that's there's a sort of the economical value chain is not complete here, and that's a disadvantage. But on the other hand, I think we can sort of contribute to gather all the good examples and the good entrepreneurs and tech industry that we do have, and present that to the world. And we have some great examples of people here being very well vested with international capital. And I often say, I mean, it's just a 3-hour train trip to Stockholm to start off with, and it's not far away to either London or Berlin or Oslo by those means anyhow. So I mean, so we're trying to sort of at least show the smorgasbord that we have in Gothenburg for investors. And even though they don't have to establish themselves here, they can at least sort of invest their money in good ventures that we do have here.
And I think, sorry.
Yeah, so this is kind of like what I was getting at a little bit. It's not necessarily does the ecosystem have to bring the capital directly to the ecosystem, but providing services to get the startups, the innovators out to those areas. So like, for example, Innovation Norway, and also the Estonia, or I can't remember exactly what it's called, Kai, but anyways, like they provide a lot of support systems. When we were working on the startup in Tallinn, they got us to Money 2020 in Copenhagen, and they got us to get out to Tokyo and these places where the capital was. And similarly here in Norway, Innovation Norway does a great job providing those support services to bring us to the places where that international capital that we need is. So I think like even some of the smaller ecosystems, because I guess like Gothenburg, or even in Norway, Bergen, like they have similar, and I would say also here in Oslo, we have similar issues. So to build the local ecosystem here, we just have to, for the time being, we have to go to where the money is. And then hopefully with, as we were talking about, with exits and building this knowledge gap with the local ecosystem, like, so startup founders that exit and people on the founding team that exited then come back. So then maybe in 5-8 years time, that isn't as necessary. Maybe we then build the reputation where then international capital is coming to us and coming to see what's happening here. But like for the time being, we just have to chase a little bit and go to where the money is.
Elina, is it possible to add a couple of points to
Yes, please.
what both Kai and Lars were saying as well, and also Björn just now. And I think two really important points. So on the infrastructure point and also on the Estonia experience, right? We have seen what public sector support and infrastructure build can do in Estonia as a prime example of that, right? A new economy without the legacy systems that many economies grapple with. The government, and not just in Estonia, across the Baltics, decided to invest heavily in broadband infrastructure and transport infrastructure, and all of that, which are absolutely fundamental enablers of innovation, and the support of the likes of Startup Estonia for government funded as well, for startups to participate in international events and so on and so forth. And actually what you just said before, Lars, the transport infrastructure, high-speed trains and so on, in order to be able to, move people to the right places. That's really important. So that's absolutely fundamental. And I think a point that you just made, Björn, which triggered a thought in my head, is you mentioned the word education, and that's absolutely fundamental as well. And one of the things that, and you mentioned sharing and so on. So that's the point, is we have to invest time and effort on education, on educating the private sector, corporates about innovation. You will find when you go to a lot of corporates, they have no idea how to engage with startups. They don't know where to find them. They know they need innovation, but have no idea where to go to look for it, right? They don't know the startups. So in Tech Nordic Advocates, we get approached all the time by companies saying, well, we are a massive consumer goods company. We're investing in food tech companies. How can you help us identify food tech companies that we can invest in or work with to fuel innovation and so on? So the education of the ecosystem, of the different players in the ecosystem, is absolutely fundamental to furthering innovation. And then there is the bit that we are pretty bad at in the Nordics, and that's bragging, right? And a nicer way of saying that is we have to get much, much better at sharing the success stories that come out of the Nordics internationally. We have to learn to brag, as the Americans say, right? Why? Because if we don't, how is anyone going to know that actually there are more, capitals, more unicorns per capita coming out of the Nordic and Baltic region than any other region in the world, right? So we are bedrock of innovation and digital and technology startup and scale-up growth. It's just the world doesn't know about it because we don't tell them. And that's part of the education. We have to educate stakeholders, not just in our own countries or in our region, but globally. Because if investors in China, and the US and elsewhere understand how much innovation in startup and scale-up growth is coming out of our region, guess what? They might start looking at our region, to grow their deal flow. Yeah? But if they don't know that there's massive opportunity and that we are extremely good at this, at fueling technology startups, then how would they know to invest in us? Right? So we got to get much better at that. And it's not in our culture, any of the Nordic countries, actually, and the Baltics. We're not very good at bragging. So we got to learn that.
We need a Nordic PR agency that's better to, with the superlatives. So
yeah, and we spend a lot of time on that with our Global Tech Advocates Network, is showcasing, and bragging is not such a nice word, but literally putting it out there, saying, you know what, here's what they're doing in Norway, here's what they're doing in Denmark or Sweden, and look at this startup scale up that's now, close to exit and all of that stuff. And the more we can showcase all those success stories, the more we can really cement the Nordics and Baltic as an innovation factory, as a global tech hub. That's a really important part of our mission.
But I dare to say that the pandemic has helped us in one way. I mean, I'm seeing from the Gothenburg Tech Week system, and we are collaborating now with different event organizations throughout the Nordics in a way that we never would have done before. And this panel now is also an example of that we are coming together and also going out. I mean, we're having Norwegian and Finnish and Danish investors coming here now in a way that we haven't had before, and they in their turn has connections, and we have investors coming in from Dutch investors coming in here as well. So things are changing and happening in a way, in a more rapid way than things would have had before, I think. Kaya, do you see the same trend? The digitalization, has that helped you this past 2 years? Or?
Very much so, yeah. Well, me as a hackathon organizer, I cannot say that it hasn't really opened up kind of like a new era. And yeah, in my own experience, when COVID hit, we didn't know really what else to do. Then we organized a hackathon. And it grew into a movement, right? There was 70 different nations organizing crisis hackathons. Then we organized the global hack, which was really, like the global community coming together. And I think that is something that, we need to be bragging about, right? And we need to be proud of it, that it is kind of the new way of connecting innovators from all across the world. So yeah, I think that, it has had a huge impact. I'm not 100% sure how it will stick. It will definitely be, something that we'll see happening more and more. But how do these teams come together? How it's going to affect the local and regional ecosystems? We don't know that yet. But yeah, seeing being the biggest fan of hackathons, and I think that's the way to bring like the grassroots level together in this kind of really fun and intense way, let's say. I think the digital era has really changed it. So not even the digital era, but yeah, just like the few past years and year and a half, especially. So yeah, let's see what comes out of it. But already I can see that a lot of kind of new connections are being created, and especially with if we mentioned these kind of event organizers and support organizations for especially. If their goal is to create, like kind of educate and create this ecosystem where it's easier to come up with ideas and to form new teams and meet new people and get new skills as well, right? So then it has really changed. We can now do it online. We can attract people from different regions at the same time, and I think that's a huge change and shift as well.
That is one really interesting thing you're pointing out, the talent acquisition, and I mean bringing talent and bringing people into these startups. That is one of the huge questions always, to find people. Björn, you're in a startup now, and I mean, how will you have people? Will you have employees online only or in remote working? How do you attract talent? Or what are your thoughts on attracting talent in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're fully distributed right now. So I'm the only one here in Oslo. And then there are two other founders that are in Tromsø, so northern Norway, 2 people in Portugal, and then 1 person in Bali. So it's completely distributed, and we mostly just go by all of the hires for the most part. I've been through word of mouth, and I think that's generally probably how we'll keep going with it. We don't really care where you are or these sorts of things. But if somebody from our direct network comes and goes, hey, this person's really great at what they do, and I think you all would mesh well with them, generally, I don't think we really care where you physically are, just that you connect with everything else about the company, like and the culture and these sorts of things. So I think that's probably how we'll go going forward. But I know there's scaling issues with that. But I'm looking forward to those problems when they arise.
But coming from, I mean, we're talking about ecosystems here, and I mean, for me at least, historically, the notion of an ecosystem is based on a regional area, like physical space that you're kind of occupying. I mean, we are all talking about the geographical region, like traveling between cities and collaborating region to region. I mean, in a more digitized world where we are more in another vertical, how do you slice these ecosystems? Lars, you're working with our physical region, but if they have talents or people coming in from all over the world, how do you see, will the idea of your clusters change? More working with the cluster company, or will they have to be physically here? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I still think it's very important to have these international connections, and being an exporting country and a region relying very much on exports, we do have the experience of traveling the world and meeting people and other cultures and so on. And also I can see at the same time with the people working more remote and so on, I can see examples of startups here that have like 25 nations in a workforce of, say, 70 people. And they built this up more or less during the pandemic. It's a very young company. It's Heart Aerospace, building an electric flight here. But at the same time, I think I also agree with Jeanette saying that, I mean, the infrastructure and having a labor area, which is, you can enlarge the labor area, makes it much easier to have a high-speed train going all the way from Oslo down to Hamburg, for example. We're going to have Hamburg to Copenhagen within a number of years, but the stretch from Copenhagen to Oslo has been under discussions for decades. But still, it would be so, you would open up so many possibilities. Even though you might work remotely, say 3 to 4 days per week, you still want to have the physical meetings and sort of get to know each other. Because when you talk about innovation, a lot of things are happening in the sort of the third room. You have one room at home, you have one room at work, but the meetings in between, those are really hard to facilitate online. That's my experience, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say, like, to qualify what I was saying, for just internal operations, don't care where anybody is. But for actual business, so like for me to do any of my jobs when I was running Startup Extreme to now trying to do distribution and enter new markets for Pzing, I almost it's really hard to get traction without physically being there. Thankfully now we're able to travel a little bit more, but I need to establish in-person relationships to get the ball moving. It's quite difficult unless you have really good referrals to establish any type of remote traction. So I 100% am aligned with you, Lars, on this.
But Elena, you know the point you made about, our ecosystem in some ways defined or even confined by geographical boundaries. Well, actually, so if you look at at our, not only Tech Nordic advocates, so across the 5 Nordic and 3 Baltic countries, but our global tech advocates ecosystem, right? We span 22 global tech hubs around the world, over 22,000 people from Silicon Valley to Australia. And actually the one defining feature, and I think social media are a fantastic example of that, Facebook being one, right, is how technology breaks down country borders and enable us to collaborate, from one end of the world to the other. The only, the lowest common denominator being time zone differences, right? But actually technology is enabling us to collaborate, irrespective of where we are, which is, God knows how we would have fared through the pandemic without technology, right? So I think actually, the geography is much less important. Actually, it's a real positive that, that because of technology, we can collaborate across country borders, right? And I think the point, and I think that's a fantastic point you made, Alina, about how the pandemic has taught us, has fueled new ways of working, and that is what happens. There's the old saying of, necessity is the mother of invention. And so when you're faced with a problem, that's how a lot of innovation occurs. Airbnb and other big global tech companies, were founded and grown at a time of crisis, when everybody said, well, that's never going to happen, Airbnb. But actually, it was at a time where, if people had no money and it was expensive to stay in hotels and da 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 da. And so, hey ho, here was Airbnb with a solution to that problem, right? So that's what happens, is when we are faced with problems, we innovate. And I think you're exactly right to say that the pandemic has fueled a lot of innovation, including new ways of working. But I also think what you just said, Björn, and what you said before, Lars, as well, is the physical proximity and the ability to work together and build relationships is really important too. So I think maybe what's coming out of all of this is this hybrid way of doing things. That I think the pandemic has taught us now when we can also travel.
Yeah, I would say, like, just in general, the physical stuff is great for establishing, but the technology has more easily allowed me to maintain relationships and those connections. So like I might only need to go to Tokyo once for a decent amount of time, and then through just doing stuff like this, calls, I can manage the relationship and maintain it better than before, where you'd have to go 4 times a year or 5 times a year, these sorts of things.
I'm going to add from my side that, it's a lot about mindset building as well, right? And when kind of like referring back to, again, these hackathons happening, and you're seeing these teams, we organized an event with African Union and the European Union, putting teams together from different continents, right? And then you kind of see that, the skills are the same. It's just you need to kind of build that language and the understanding and the mindset and the, ways of working. And then put those people together in those, it can be a 48-hour challenge during a hackathon. It can be something else that they do together, which is just something, like a hackathon is a big teamwork exercise, right? And that's what you can start doing online, especially connecting these people together through these kinds of events where they actually learn, this kind of universal startup way of thinking or building things. And obviously, adding in from different cultures what they have, especially, like the same thing, like Jeanette said, that us Nordics, we need to learn how to brag, right? And yeah, you can kind of see through those global or, online events that people are really bringing in their best practices, best knowledges, then starting to work together and really, getting new skills and new ways to work. So yeah, I think in talent, global talent kind of ecosystem and the talent moving around and actually choosing now a place where to be and where to do their business physically and virtually, right? I think it's really important that these kind of events happen, that people come together, they understand, where do they want to go next, which kind of cultures do they want to work with, and it is really now like this global community, right? So in talent wise, I think that has been a big step forward.
Those EU Hack the Crisis hackathons were so much fun. And if anybody else went to multiple of them, you would then run into a lot of the same people, and even take your team that you had from the Finnish version and go take that to the Danish version. And that was just like such a great example of this purely online relationship building and connection making.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like adding on to the point, as an organizer, I saw a lot of the same ideas popping out, obviously, because the kind of the problem was the same, right? Like, what can we do really quickly to now leverage the crisis or help the people in need, right? So a lot of the ideas actually sparked from the same thing, and they were quite similar. And then you realize, like, okay, how can I get this team from Madagascar to come and meet the team from Finland? Like, how can I get them to start working together on this thing after the event is done? So I think this is actually happening a lot, right? A lot of the similar ideas are being built, and it doesn't need to always be in competition. It could also be in cooperation.
Wow. I think this is such an interesting discussion, and I think we could continue it. And I know we've been having it before, and I know that we will have it in the future. Our time is running out now, so I just want to add on final questions. Like, we've been talking a lot about the future of the system now with digitalization, and like how we maybe cut our system needs differently. But I mean, Lars, if you could look into the crystal ball, what do you think what kind of thing will you be focusing on now to continue to build and grow the ecosystem here in the Gothenburg region?
Well, I'll definitely want to pick up what Jeanette suggested, that we're going to brag a bit more. We try to brag based on facts and our very good industry and the brilliant sort of startups that we do have, and some success stories to build on. I really would like to see some sort of shining star that would actually reinvest here, and being sort of another even larger role model for other startups to do their thing. But also, I want to stress that we also want to build on, and we often brag about that we really do good on collaboration here. So if you look at the triple helix with the public, the private, and the academia, we that's really where we excel. And we hear that from international visits that we do have. So they're more interested in how we get a collaboration of 15 to 20 actors playing together, rather than the electric bus that is the result of the collaboration. So I think those things, and still we want to attract talented people and try to sort of also show what a nice place Gothenburg and the Nordics is. So that's another thing that we need to. The whole sort of, it's not all about work. You have to see the whole picture really, and try to develop that as good as possible, really.
Thank you. Jeanette, to end thoughts about like what will be the most necessary thing to do in the future to keep on building a thriving ecosystem. You're on mute.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, you go first, Byron.
Yeah, okay. So for me, it's I quite a lot think in terms of working without so much borders, but in collaborating in solving similar problems. So like for me in Oslo, and for you all in Gothenburg, I feel as though we're so close, yet we do things together so very little. And I think in general, it's easier for our two communities to collaborate than it probably is for you to go to Stockholm and collaborate there. So I feel like these are opportunities that we generally miss right now. I know in Tromsø, they just did Arctic Innovation Week, where they're trying to collaborate with all the different Arctic regional communities. So Northern Sweden, Northern Finland, Iceland, and Greenland, and try and collaborate on that level. Because even in Norway, and I know in Finland as well, if you're a startup coming from up north, we don't really take you that seriously in the beginning. So it's easier for them all to collaborate together. So thinking of problem solving on the same level of issues, and then just forgetting about the borders and trying to collaborate with those similar like-minded people to solve the same issues. And that's generally where my mind is at right now.
Kai, you were on that beforehand. Do you agree? Do you want to add something?
Yeah, definitely. That's the challenge here, right? To add something new, because I totally agree with everything that has been said. But yeah, I think, the same thing that we have been talking about here, and to summarize, that we will kind of, as a startup community, or let's say then the support community, that we actually listen and see what's happening and what is needed to be to create, right? So if we're talking about we need talent, then we do actually organize these kind of virtual global wider hackathons to get people to work together and to get them to actually understand their different work cultures, and then come into one. If we see successful exits happen, then we actually kind of take these people and give them knowledge about angel investing, get them to do syndicates together, actually give them this this knowledge and kind of courage as well to kind of join in the ecosystem. So really just seeing and hearing what is happening, and then reacting quickly. So I think, in my own experience, we reacted quite quickly to when the COVID hit, right? Like it was 4 hours, and then we thought, yeah, let's do a hackathon. So I think that's the kind of spirit that we should have, like moving fast and maybe not breaking things, but but kind of keeping in that startup mindset, that we actually adapt quite quickly, and we're quite flexible, and we think of new ideas all the time, and we're ready to test them out, even if sometimes they're not perfect, they fail. Just keeping in that startup mindset and spirit ourselves.
Thank you. Jeanette, is your mute off now?
Look, I think a lot of important points have been made, right? They are all really, really important. But I think if I were to add a point to that, then it would actually be to learn to collaborate better across the Nordic region, and by which I mean the Baltics as well, actually. And I've got to say this, when I set up Tech Nordic Advocates, and as you know, with the sibling of Tech London Advocates and all of that, I was absolutely clear that the Nordics is the Nordics and the Baltics. It's fundamental. And I can categorically tell you, we have learned so much from working with the Baltic countries, and all the things we've discussed, the infrastructure build, the innovation, the public sector role, and all of that from very small countries that have created real success stories. That's fundamental. So I think if we could do something really well in the years going forward, then it would be to learn to work much better together as a region. You've got to remember, investors that sit in the US or in Tokyo or somewhere else, they go, let's go to the Nordics. They don't say, let's go to Denmark or Norway or Sweden. They say, let's go to the Nordics. So if we can try, along with the whole bragging thing, to collaborate much better, and set aside sometimes the fact that one is in Stockholm, the other is in Copenhagen, the third is in Vilnius, then we can really make 2 and 2 equal 5 across the region. I think we could get better at that.
Well, thank you so much for all those insights, comments, and thoughts. I bring with me a lot of notes from this session that, we as an ecosystem should be like entrepreneurs to innovate, move fast, and adapt, but also that we need to brag about all the great things that we do. And of course, collaboration is key. Thank you so much, Lars, Jeanette, Björn, and Kai, for joining me in on this discussion. And thank you guys for watching this session with us. We have a lot of interesting events coming the rest of the week, which I hope that you join into. All of them are streamed, of course, but you can also come in person. But for now, I encourage you all to continue building and be a part of our ecosystem here in Gothenburg, physically here or somewhere else digitally to catch up with us. So thank you guys for listening in and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena, for steering.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.